Hello. Coming to you months later. I'm gonna finish up. I said told myself I was gonna do a best movies and a best music video instead of just cramming everything together. And then I didn't edit the movie video for months. Just did it, but I'm feeling a renewed desire to be posting videos, talking about stuff. I've been reading more, so I've got kind of a backlog of books I want to do reviews on, so I'm going to be working on that as well. But here's my favorite albums that I got into heavily during the year 2023. This one's probably going to be kind of quick-ish for me, at least. I will play some snippets of songs and stuff for you guys, so you can kind of decide if you like what you hear. This is also my first video with the new specs. Finally came to terms with the fact that I needed these bad boys, and I've been wearing them for about 2 months now. And it's good. I'm glad I'm glad that I have them. I've been having a lot less eye strain ever since I went over. So yeah, new look, new you, new year. Not really. It's almost May. I have this list albums that I just got into last year, and I keep the list in like a sort of chronological order. Whenever there's an album I get into, I throw it on the list. So I'm not going to rank these really. I might pick number one at the end. Yeah, I'm just going to run through these in order. So the first album on the list is Ghost Tropic by Songs Ohia. Jason Molina, someone who I love dearly, who I've listened to a lot for a long time. This was just one of the ones that I hadn't gotten into yet. And it's gotten to the point where I think that this is like maybe my favorite project he ever did. But it's so dark and harrowing and unfun and unpleasant that it's like one that I don't feel like I'm going to listen to over and over again, like a Magnolia Electric Company type of record. But it's so powerful. It feels like going out into hell. This hopeless darkness that just subsumes you. And then there are two moments in the record where it's like the sky clears and you have just this brief respite of sun that comes and shines through in the middle of this just all-consuming storm. None of the other records that he ever made really sound like this record. I don't know that there's a lot of like him playing this live. I've never really found any videos of him playing any of the songs on this record live. This record was recorded with Mike Mogis from Bright Eyes when they were very young. This is a record came out in 2000, so like Fevers and Mirrors era Bright Eyes. It's the only record he made with Mike Mogis. It's just really beautiful, haunting, and intense, and desperate, and hopeless, and dark. And the cover is just black to kind of pair with that. The next thing I have on the list is Violator by Depeche Mode from 1990. This is Depeche Mode's kind of like most well-loved album. I always liked Depeche Mode, and there are songs on this album that certainly I knew before getting into it. But there was just, I in the spring last year, I had this sort of like phase where I got really into listening to like 80s goth adjacent kind of like synth pop stuff like this, and this was the main one that I was listening to a lot. Violator is a fantastic record, just like sexy, sad dance music. And this one's got so many bangers on it. It's got Personal Jesus. It's got Policy of Truth. It's just one of the best, like, synth pop albums ever made, probably. Third thing on here was a new release last year, the collaborative album between Danny Brown and JPEG Mafia, entitled Scaring the Hose. All beats handled by JPEG Mafia with rapping from him and Danny Brown. This album made a huge splash, unsurprisingly. If you are a fan of alternative hip-hop, of experimental hip-hop, then obviously I'm sure these guys have both been on your radar for a long time. They're kind of a match made in heaven. Everybody, when this album got announced, everybody was like, this is going to be incredible, and it was. Danny is someone that I've always been kind of hot and cold on, personally. Some albums he makes I really like a lot. Other ones I'm kind of okay with. I loved Triple X when that came out, and I liked Atrocity Exhibition quite a bit as well, but the other ones have been kind of lukewarm for me. And then his new one that came out after this one, Quaranta, I also was kind of felt middling about. I think he's a great rapper, but I think that a lot of it is that, like, he really treats each album as its own kind of thing. He works with, like, specific producers, goes for specific vibes on each record, and it's not always what I'm into. But this record, where it's basically just a JPEG Mafia record that has Danny Brown featuring on every song, that's kind of more up my alley. I think that Peggy is one of the best beat makers ever, probably the best person to come up in beat making in the last 10 years, in my opinion. This record has some of the best beats he's ever made. There's some crazy chops, weird samples. It's chaotic. It's all over the place. The energy is crazy. I just love this record because it feels like doing amphetamines and in like Japan or something, like just being like sensory overload, and everything is confusing. There's just sound constantly, and it's always just like going. And one of my favorite hip hop projects in recent memory, and just such a fun record to listen to. And speaking of fun records to listen to, another record from 2023, the sophomore album by 100 gecs, 10,000 gecs, their follow-up to their debut album 1000 gecs, which came out in 2019, I'm pretty sure. That was a record that I loved dearly. It's super fun, hyper pop, crazy, all over the place shit. Just a true throwing everything in the kitchen sink type of mentality to music. Every type of popular music that you can think of. I mean, and 10,000 gecs. It's longer. It's got a higher production value. It's poppier. It's not quite as experimental as the first record was, but that's not to say that it's not still imbued with that sort of anarchistic spirit that 100 gecs brings with them. They do nu metal on this record. They have, like hair metal shit. They're doing hip hop. They're doing ska. They're doing all sorts of shit on this record, and it's catchy. It's fun. It's a record you can put on in the car with your friends, and everybody's just going to have a good time listening to it, even if they never heard it before. I was a little trepidatious, being like, oh, it's taking them so long to make this follow-up. And it certainly, I don't think it's as good as the debut, but it's still really fun. and I still think that they have, a lot of potential future to go. I'm really interested to see where they go next, because this feels like they sort of narrowed in their focus a little bit. I would be really interested to see if on a next record they really tried to maybe take some left turns that we're not expecting, which I think would be really cool. Next is a record that's a decade old or so, from 2012. It's Floral Green by Title Fight. This is probably the record I listened to the most this year. And I still have been listening to it. It's always kind of in my rotation right now. Title Fight were a Philadelphia-based post-hardcore, pop-punk, emo, adjacent, whatever, that kind of Venn diagram of styles that was active in the 2010s. This was their sophomore record. They made 3 records before they went on a hiatus, and we all hope and pray they will return. I've known about Title Fight for forever, but it just sort of like was one of those things that I never got into until last year. I'd been listening to some of their songs for a while, but hadn't like fully like sunk my teeth into a record until last year. And this record is just fantastic. It's pretty much everything that you want from this sort of style of post-hardcore that's like got a lot of roots in pop-punk. It's not like a Fugazi or an Unwound type of post-hardcore, but it has the aggression and energy of like post-hardcore with the sort of lyrical content of like an emo band and the catchiness and the melody of like a pop-punk band. They kind of really bring it all to the table, Title Fight. On this record, my most listened to song on Spotify Wrapped was the opener, Numb But I Still Feel It. I posted a guitar cover of it pretty recently on the channel here, so you can check that out if you are interested. Title Fight's great. They're just, this is just kind of like my wheelhouse type of shit. I don't feel like I have a ton to say about it. It's basically like, if you like this type of music and you haven't listened to Title Fight, like, you're doing yourself a disservice. Next is a recent but not 2023 record, Glow On by Turnstile. This is a record that made a huge splash when it came out, and I've known about it, and I listened to it when it came out, and I liked it, but I didn't really get into it more heavily until last year. Turnstile's a hardcore band from Baltimore that with this record kind of moved more into using inspiration from like dream pop, shoegaze, pop punk, and blending it with hardcore in a way that really made a lot of elitist punk rock guys mad. Very kind of reminiscent of a decade earlier when Deaf Heaven put out Sunbather and made all of the black metal guys mad in a very similar way, with the Pink record that sort of brings in, genre fusions that felt really fresh and gave the record a sort of crossover appeal. I think that this record will really appeal to people who don't listen to like hardcore and aren't like in the scene and like don't pay attention to punk rock shit. I've only really got like one foot in the door, to be quite honest. And I would never try to claim that I'm like in the scene or anything like that. I love punk rock music, but like it's not what I'm all about. And I think that I'm kind of like a very big mark for a record like this. And then like they went on this big stadium tour with Blink-182, opening for Blink-182. And like, I think that if you grew up listening to Blink-182, I think that you would really like this Turnstile record, even though it isn't very similar to Blink-182. But I think that they are bringing in enough of a sort of pop influence on this record that it's going to have more mass appeal, but still has a very firm foundation in hardcore, which is really cool. I think that it's really cool to have these sort of crossover records that bring more casual eyes to something like that, especially because like Turnstile, because they have these strong hardcore roots, are, you know, promoting DIY stuff. They're promoting progressive politics, and when we can expose people, especially young people, to things like that, I think it's very cool, especially in times like this where you know, genocide is happening, and we're sort of being pushed into war in a way that most people don't want to be, but we don't have a choice because we don't actually get to have a say in the matter. Anyways, next up, 2015 compilation album, Everything So Far by Pinegrove. Pinegrove was a band that I had, you know, known about but never really listened to, and then a song of theirs from this record, Need To, blew up on TikTok last year, and then through that I started listening to this comp, which was basically everything that they had released before their first record. It's a like early singles and EPs, and then like an album that they kind of like disowned as an album and then put it on here. And it's pretty long. It's like 80-minute, 20 song, you know, big beast of a thing. Fantastic. Pinegrove sort of lives in the same sort of gray space between like indie / emo and like country / Americana that I would put like certain Bright Eyes records in, but definitely like I think Evan Stevens Hall and Conor Oberst are very different songwriters too at the same time. Conor Oberst has this tendency to do things that make me cringe really hard, even though I like him and I like a lot of records. It's like even my favorite Bright Eyes records have like moments, have lyrics that make me go, ugh, like I hate that. Like I hate the spoken word intro to My Wakest Morning. That shit is so cringe. And certain lines, it's always bad. I just, and like, I know I don't get that with Pinegrove. And I think that there's something about, maybe it's because me and Evan are about the same age, and there's something about his lyrics that I feel like a stronger kind of resonance with than I do with Conor Oberst's. He's not as tortured. He's more sort of he's sad, certainly, but it's not so theater kid dramatic like it is with Conor, I think. And I love the things that sort of bring like indie rock and country together, and then with that sort of emo twinge, that sort of like that great sort of melodic singing, but with those sort of like country style harmonies. Get out of here. I mean, that's 2024 is the year of country, not just for me, but I think for everybody, but also like definitely for me. And it sort of really began for me with getting really into this Pinegrove record. Pinegrove's first record is going to definitely be on my 2024 list when I get around to doing that next year. This record's just fantastic, you know, so good. Next up, another record that's like recent but not from last year, 2021, Volcanic Bird Enemy and the Voiced Concern by Lil Ugly Mane. This was like probably, if Title Fight wasn't the record I listened to the most, this was the second, or this was the first. There's kind of a toss-up. Ugly Mane, Travis Miller, he's a guy from Virginia who's made a lot of music in a lot of different styles under a lot of different names for a long time, but he blew up, got best known in 2012. He made this record under the name Lil Ugly Mane called Mr. Thug Isolation. It's one of my favorite rap albums of all time. It was sort of a love letter to 90s Memphis style 666, Tommy Wright III type of like horror rap shit. And he hasn't really made any other records like that since. He's made other records as Lil Ugly Mane that were more sort of experimental industrial hip hop. Then he tried to kind of retire the Lil Ugly Mane name, did some stuff under the name Bedwetter for a while, and then had resurrected the Lil Ugly Mane name for this record, the first record he put out with that name in like 5 years. And this record is like not a rap album. This album is like a sort of like trip hop, shoegaze, like alt rock kind of plunderphonics. It's a very weird, very interesting record. There's songs that sample like children's songs and like all sorts of weird shit on here, and it's very dour, it's very sad and very depressed, and but very vibey, and sort of like a really good kind of like summer driving around with the windows in your car down. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Eels, almost like 90s early Eels, like the first 3 or 4 Eels records. Like break beats with like guitars and like singing, kind of like monotonous singing, kind of detached, sad sort of vibe with the singing. Yeah, this record's just a banger, and there's so many songs on it that are just like fucking pussy poppers. Like, holy shit, great shit. Next, I have Beach Music by Alex G. I've, been loving Alex G for years now. Kind of slowly working my way through the records that I wasn't paying attention when they were coming out. And this was one of the ones that I hadn't really gotten into yet. Beach Music from 2015. This one's interesting. It's kind of it's one of his more sort of like consistent vibe-wise records. It feels like almost like more pavementy than any of his other records, I think. This record reminds me a lot of like Slanted and Enchanted, and there's a lot of like drop D with those sort of like pavement chords, which is like, I don't know, if you don't play music you don't know what I'm talking about, but it makes me think about Pavement. And if you like Alex G, this is a great record. It's not my favorite record by him, but it's still a good record. Next, Laurel Halo Atlas. This is a record that came out last year. Laurel Halo is an electronic musician. She had this record that came out like a decade ago that was like an album that I was really, 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 really into in 2020 when the pandemic was happening, and I was going through a lot of like personal getting divorced and having a hard time. And that record is sort of more of it's vocal, and it's one that I think divides a lot of people. I love that record so much. Quarantine by Laurel Halo. And this one is more in line with what she's been doing recently, which is more sort of ambient, neoclassical almost kind of stuff. This record's like just a straight up ambient record. There's a lot of featured players on this record, strings. It's just a really sort of serene, beautiful, kind of subsuming blue feeling record that I've been listening to a lot when I read, because it's just kind of, it's really placid and just really kind of like puts you into the ocean of the mind and lets you kind of be still, which is kind of what I want when I'm going to listen to a record, or read a book, I should say. Next is Repetition by Unwound. I started getting into Unwound a couple years ago, and I've been kind of progressively getting more and more into them. Leaves Turn Inside You is like their final and most beloved record. This one is also very beloved, Repetitions from 1996. There's something about this record that I really like, where like the title is very telling, where it's like they come up with like a riff and then they just kind of like do it forever. And the riffs are all the kind of riff where you just feel like they could go forever, sort of similar conceptually to like 2010s era Swans, where like they had like songs that were just like a riff that felt like it could just go forever. Unwound, you know, one of the best post-hardcore bands, one of the best bands of the 90s. Touring for the first time in 20 years right now. I'm going to be grabbing a ticket soon, hoping to get to see them at the Fine Line this summer. This is just like, again, like this type of like 90s post-hardcore shit like this, or Fugazi, or Drive Like Jehu, and you know, all of that shit like is just really in my wheelhouse, something I really like a lot. And I think that it's also really interesting too, if you maybe remember the 90s. Not that I really strongly do. I was pretty young. But like, it is interesting to think about how, like, well, right now, rock music is very sort of firmly something that is not in the zeitgeist. There's this this tweet that's been making the rounds the last day or two about how like that's like sort of heralded to many the boomerification of Gen Xers. There's this guy being like, millennials haven't produced their own Nirvana or Pearl Jam or Alice in Chains or Soundgarden, and like the truth, there's two pieces of truth for why that may be true, which is like, A, rock music is not popular music anymore, so if you're not looking for it, then you're not going to hear it. And then B, like things change, and like there are different types of rock music that are also good and whatever. But like, it's interesting to think about how there's these rock bands from that era that are so popular, and like most everybody knows songs by them, like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots and all of that. And then at the same time, you had bands like Unwound and Fugazi and Drive Like Jehu and Tortoise and stuff doing these different types of rock music that, when you think about how they are contemporaneous to each other, it's very interesting. And also interesting to think about that in the context of like how rock music has just stopped being popular. Like the closest thing we've had to popular rock music, I feel like, in the last like 5 years is Boy Genius, which is maybe generous to call them rock. I mean, it is, but like, it's not Pearl Jam, right? The last thing I have on the list is Music Has a Right to Children by Boards of Canada. This is an album that, like, I mean, like, if I wanted to be harsh to myself, this shouldn't be on this list, because this is an album I've known and have listened to for a long time. But I kind of like got really obsessed with Boards of Canada in the last like 6 months or so, and I've been listening to them a lot. And I've been listening to Gio Gotti a lot more recently, but in the fall, winter, I was listening to a lot of Music Has a Right to Children while I was reading, mostly doing stuff, writing, just like needing sort of ambiance, that sort of like what they call in music recently, hypnagogic sort of memory, nostalgia inducing sound. And I love the analog synths, the detuned synths, and the old drum machines, and the strange vocal samples. It just gives this beautiful, ethereal world that these Boards of Canada records live inside of, and just a great time. That's the whole list. I'm done. 30 minutes. Look at that. Phew. All right. I've got, let me think, like 2 or 3 book videos that I need to make. So hopefully those will be coming soon. I'm reading more. I'm making things happen. And I am also on my way to 1,000 subscribers, which is insane. And close to 750. So yeah, I don't know. Stick around, see what I do. I'm not consistent, and I never have been, and I probably never will be. But like, there is probably more coming fairly soon. So yeah.